Have you ever wondered why some people seem to love their families deeply but still keep them at arm's length? Why they'd rather spend holidays alone than deal with family drama? Well, if you're an INFJ or know someone who is, you're about to discover something that'll blow your mind. Today we're diving deep into one of the most misunderstood aspects of the INFJ personality type, their complicated relationship with family. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why these sensitive souls often choose distance over closeness when it comes to their own blood relatives. 1. The INFJ personality. A quick overview. Before we jump into the family dynamics, let's get clear on what makes INFJs tick. INFJs are known as the advocates or the counselors in the Myers-Briggs system. They're introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging types who make up less than 2% of the population. These folks are the ultimate contradiction. They're deeply empathetic yet highly selective about who gets close to them. They crave meaningful connections but can't stand superficial small talk. They want to help everyone but often neglect their own needs in the process. INFJs have this incredible ability to see right through people. It's like they've got emotional X-ray vision. They can sense what you're feeling before you even know it yourself. But here's the kicker. This gift becomes a curse when it comes to family relationships. 2. The emotional overwhelm factor. Let's talk about something most people don't understand about INFJs. They're emotional sponges. When they're around family members, they don't just experience their own emotions. Nope, they're also picking up on everyone else's feelings, stress, and unspoken tensions. Imagine walking into a room and instantly feeling your mom's anxiety about money, your dad's frustration with work, your siblings' relationship drama, and your grandmother's loneliness all at once. That's what family gatherings feel like for many INFJs. This emotional overwhelm isn't just uncomfortable, it's genuinely exhausting. While other family members can brush off tension or ignore passive-aggressive comments, INFJs feel everything intensely. They can't just turn off their sensitivity, no matter how much they might want to. That's why you'll often find INFJs stepping outside for fresh air during family events or suddenly needing to help in the kitchen. They're not being antisocial, they're trying to survive the emotional tsunami that hits them every time they're around multiple family members. 3. The authenticity struggle. Here's something that drives INFJs absolutely crazy: fake family dynamics. You know what I'm talking about. Those families where everyone pretends everything's perfect, where real issues get swept under the rug, and where keeping up appearances matters more than genuine connection. INFJs value authenticity above almost everything else. They can't stand pretending that Uncle Bob isn't an alcoholic or that mom and dad's marriage isn't falling apart. When families operate on this surface level, INFJs feel like they're suffocating. They'd rather have one honest conversation about real problems than 100 superficial exchanges about the weather. But here's the problem: most families aren't ready for that level of honesty. When INFJs try to bring up real issues or express their true feelings, they often get shut down, dismissed, or told they're too sensitive. This creates a painful choice for INFJs. They can either participate in what feels like a charade, which goes against their core values, or they can distance themselves to protect their integrity. More often than not, they choose distance. For childhood trauma and family patterns, let's get real about something many INFJs have experienced: being the family scapegoat or emotional caretaker from a young age. Because of their natural empathy and intuition, INFJ children often end up in roles they never asked for. Maybe they became the mediator between fighting parents. Perhaps they were the one everyone came to with their problems. Or they might have been the sensitive child who got blamed for family dysfunction because they were the only ones brave enough to point out what was wrong. Many INFJs grow up feeling responsible for their family's emotional well-being. They learn to suppress their own needs to keep the peace. They become expert people pleasers, always trying to make everyone else happy while ignoring their own pain. As adults, these patterns continue unless the INFJ makes a conscious choice to break them. And sometimes, breaking these unhealthy patterns means creating physical and emotional distance from family members who refuse to acknowledge or change their behavior. 5. The perfectionism trap. INFJs often struggle with perfectionism, And this extends to their family relationships. They have this idealistic vision of what family should be like: supportive, understanding, emotionally connected, and growth-oriented. When their actual family falls short of this ideal, and let's be honest, all families do, INFJs can become deeply disappointed. They might spend years trying to fix their family dynamics, thinking that if they just say the right thing or do the right thing, everything will magically improve. But here's what they eventually learn: you can't change people who don't want to change. You can't force emotional maturity on family members who are comfortable with dysfunction. And you definitely can't single-handedly heal generational trauma. This realization often leads to what looks like withdrawal but is actually self-preservation. INFJs start setting boundaries not because they don't care, but because they care too much and it's destroying them. 6. The need for deep, meaningful connections. INFJs don't do surface-level relationships. They're wired for depth, meaning, and genuine connection. This need becomes particularly challenging in family settings where relationships are often based on obligation rather than choice. Think about it. In friendships, INFJs can choose people who share their values and communication style. They can find friends who appreciate their depth and don't judge them for being too intense. But with family, they're stuck with people they might never choose to be friends with if they met them as strangers. This doesn't mean INFJs don't love their families. They often love them fiercely. But love doesn't automatically create understanding or compatibility. INFJs might find themselves feeling more connected to chosen family close friends who truly get them than to their biological relatives. 7. Boundary setting as self-care. Here's something people often misunderstand about INFJs who distance themselves from family: they're not being selfish or cold. They're practicing radical self-care. For someone who naturally gives and gives until they're empty, setting boundaries is actually a sign of growth and maturity. INFJs learn, often the hard way, that they can't pour from an empty cup. If being around certain family members consistently drains them, triggers their anxiety, or forces them to be someone they're not, then limiting that contact isn't mean, it's necessary. This might look like skipping some family gatherings, limiting phone calls, or being selective about which family events they attend. It's not about punishment or revenge. It's about protecting their mental and emotional health so they can show up as their best selves in the relationships that do work. 8. The misunderstood nature of INFJ love. One of the biggest misconceptions about INFJs is that if they love you, they'll always be available and accommodating. But INFJ love is more complex than that. They love deeply, but they also love wisely. An INFJ might love their family members deeply while also recognizing that certain relationships are toxic or unhealthy. They understand that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and stop enabling destructive patterns. This type of love is hard for other personality types to understand, especially those who equate love with constant presence and availability. Family members might interpret the INFJ's boundaries as rejection or lack of care, when in reality, it often takes tremendous love and courage to set those boundaries. 9. The energy management challenge. Let's talk about something practical: energy management. INFJs are introverts who need significant alone time to recharge. But family relationships often don't respect this need. Family members might expect the INFJ to be available for every gathering, every crisis, every drama. They might take it personally when the INFJ needs space or seems withdrawn. This creates additional stress for the INFJ, who now has to manage not only their own energy but also everyone else's expectations and hurt feelings. Over time, many INFJs realize that they simply don't have the energy bandwidth to maintain close relationships with family members who don't understand or respect their needs. It's not that they don't want to, they literally can't without sacrificing their own well-being. 10. Breaking generational patterns. Many INFJs who distance themselves from family are actually doing important work. They're breaking generational patterns of dysfunction. They're choosing not to pass on trauma, poor communication patterns, or unhealthy relationship dynamics. This work is often lonely and misunderstood. Family members might accuse them of thinking they're better than everyone else, or being too good for the family. But INFJs aren't motivated by superiority, They're motivated by a deep desire to heal and grow. Sometimes, breaking these patterns requires physical distance. Sometimes it requires emotional boundaries. And sometimes it requires both. The INFJ becomes the family member who says, "This stops with me," even when that decision is painful and isolating. 11. The role of criticism and judgment. INFJs are highly sensitive to criticism, even when it's delivered with good intentions. Unfortunately, families often feel they have the right to criticize and judge each other in ways they'd never treat friends or acquaintances. Maybe the family constantly comments on the INFJ's life choices, career path, relationships, or lifestyle. Perhaps they dismiss the INFJ's interests as weird or impractical. Or they might use guilt and manipulation to try to control the INFJ's behavior. Over time, this constant criticism erodes the INFJ's sense of self-worth and makes family interactions feel unsafe. They start to associate family gatherings with judgment and criticism rather than love and support. As a form of self-protection, they begin to limit their exposure to these negative interactions. 12. The search for understanding. At their core, INFJs desperately want to be understood by their families. They want their family members to see and appreciate their unique gifts, to understand why they think and feel the way they do, and to accept them without trying to change them. But this understanding often remains elusive. Family members might see the INFJ's sensitivity as weakness, their need for alone time as antisocial behavior, or their deep thinking as overthinking. They might try to fix the INFJ or encourage them to be more like other family members. When INFJs repeatedly experience misunderstanding and lack of acceptance from their families, they may eventually stop trying to bridge that gap. It's too painful to keep hoping for understanding that never comes. 3. Creating chosen family. Here's something beautiful that often happens when INFJs distance themselves from problematic family relationships. They create chosen family. They build deep, meaningful relationships with friends who become like siblings, mentors who become like parents, and communities that provide the support and understanding their biological families couldn't offer. This chosen family often understands the INFJ in ways their biological family never could. They celebrate the INFJ's unique qualities instead of trying to change them. They provide the emotional safety and acceptance that every human being needs to thrive. This doesn't mean the INFJ stops caring about their biological family, but it does mean they stop expecting that family to meet all their emotional needs. They find those needs met elsewhere, which actually takes pressure off the family relationships. Conclusion. So why do INFJs often keep great distance from family relationships? It's not because they're cold, selfish, or superior. It's because they're highly sensitive individuals who need emotional safety, authenticity, and understanding to thrive. When family relationships consistently lack these elements, INFJs make the difficult but necessary choice to protect themselves through distance. This distance isn't about not loving their families. It's about loving themselves enough to recognize what they need to be healthy and whole. If you're an INFJ struggling with family relationships, know that you're not alone. Your need for boundaries doesn't make you a bad person. Your sensitivity isn't a flaw to be fixed. And your desire for authentic, meaningful connections is actually a gift, even when it makes family dynamics more complicated. For family members of INFJs watching this, try to understand that your INFJ loved one isn't trying to hurt you by needing space. They're trying to preserve their ability to love you by protecting their own emotional well-being. The best thing you can do is respect their boundaries and work on creating the kind of relationship where they feel safe to be themselves. Remember, distance doesn't always mean disconnection. Sometimes it means creating the space necessary for healthier, more authentic relationships to grow. And that's something worth supporting even when it's hard to understand. Thanks for watching, and remember, your sensitivity is your superpower, not your weakness. Use it wisely, protect it fiercely, and never apologize for being exactly who you are.